Alright, so I'm not doing my normal video tonight. I'm doing a tribute to the officers that have died so far this month. I said 7 in my post earlier. There were actually 9, so that was my mistake. All 9 will be listed on this video. I'm going to keep all the politics out of it. I am going to ask that you share this video. I think these guys have earned that so that we can get their stories out there. I try to be pretty brief with it. We're still looking at probably the longest video I've ever done, probably 10 minutes or so. Enough to tell everybody's story, but you know, not super crazy. And before I get started, I just want to remind everybody that police officers are people too. They're husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, and that this affects their families as well. Even being a police officer in general, your family makes a lot of sacrifice. So we'll go ahead and get started. Alright, so in order to keep this from being like a 20-minute long video, I'm going to go over brief details on each of these, and I would like to and probably could spend all night talking about these, but I'm just going to be kind of short and brief on it and try to keep the video around 5 to 7 minutes long. So, first one is Deputy Mark Stazek. On September 17th of this year, he's with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office. He and another deputy responded to a disturbance call at an auto parts store. Basically, as they rolled up, they were ambushed. Suspect fired, striking his partner in the arm. She survived, and then he was fatally struck. Other deputies arrived on scene, and they also engaged the suspect in gunfire. The suspect was shot and injured. This deputy was 27 years old, and he had been a cop for about 4.5 years, so he was 22 and a half when he started. I was 22 when I started. This guy started pretty young and still had a whole lot of career left. Next one we're going to talk about is Deputy Robert Coonsey the third. He was with the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office in Kansas, and on September 16th, he got called to a suspicious person call. What he didn't know when he arrived on scene is that this subject was in a stolen vehicle. He encountered the subject. At some point, they became engaged in a gunfight. And even though Deputy Coonsey had been fatally shot, he still somehow was able to return fire and kill the suspect. This guy right here we're going to go ahead and label him as an official badass, because that was pretty awesome. He had been a cop for 18 years. He had a wife and a kid, and he was 41 years old. Like I said, that to be shot like that and still be able to return fire and kill the suspect is pretty awesome. Next, we're going to look at Police Officer Oscar Reyes out of Costa Mesa PD in California. This officer was only 43 years old. There's a ton of stress that goes into police work, and you know, between getting reports done on time and dealing with the general public, a lot of the things you have to see. I mean, dead kids, you know, maybe your partner getting killed, just a whole lot of bad stuff out there that law enforcement has to deal with, and then you add on top of all that, you know, the stress of, well, if I do this, is it going to make the news, and are they going to twist it around and make me look bad? And unfortunately, after competing in a little motorcycle course where a bunch of agencies got together, and you know, they drive through cones and do different courses and stuff, this officer at 43 years old had a heart attack and died. He had been a police officer for 13 years, and he left behind a wife and 3 kids. Pretty bad deal. The next one we're going to talk about is Police Chief Frank McClellan Jr. out of, I believe it's Ladonia PD in Georgia. On September 5th, there was a vehicle pursuit. I believe it had already gone through 2 counties by the time it was coming into his city. Multiple agencies were involved, and you know, as a police officer, you want to get in the middle of that chase, and you want to be in there and get to drive fast and get the adrenaline side of it. But this guy had the public safety in mind, and he was actually blocking off a road so that cars wouldn't come out. Some busy intersection, I'm sure, and he was blocking the intersection so cars wouldn't pull out there and get hit by this idiot that was probably driving, 60, 70, 80 miles an hour through town, probably in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and so instead of getting involved in all the action and fun, this guy actually parked his patrol car to stop traffic, and this idiot they were chasing slammed into him. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional. It doesn't matter. He shouldn't have been running, and he shouldn't have been drunk, and he never should have been on the road to begin with. After the suspect vehicle struck his vehicle, it bounced off and hit a motorcycle, killing Chief McClelland and the motorcycle rider. The suspect was arrested for DUI and 2 counts of vehicular homicide. Next is a correctional officer. Armando Gallegos out of the Department of Corrections in California. He actually passed away on September 14th from injuries he sustained back in April. He was attacked by 12 inmates, and these guys were wanting to hurt him so bad that even when additional correctional officers arrived and were pepper spraying him and trying to pull him off, they continued to assault him. They were finally pulled off of him, and this guy had some pretty serious injuries, and like I said, it happened in April, and he died September 12th. He was 56 years old and had been a correctional officer for 13 years. These do show up on the Officer Down Memorial page, and if you think about it, they are law enforcement. Whereas police officers deal with these guys for a little while on the streets, these guys have to deal with the worst of the worst every day. These are guys that are convicted felons and in prison. So, y'all are probably pretty familiar with this one. This is gonna be Officer Garrett Hall out of Fort Worth PD. September 13th, he was assigned, and I'm not sure if he was plainclothes or uniform. Based off his picture where he has the beard and stuff, I'm gonna say he was probably assigned to a plainclothes division. But this task force he was assigned to this day was made up of plainclothes and uniformed officers, and what they had were a string of robberies. So, the difference between burglary and robbery. Burglary is if you basically break into a house and you're trying to steal something or a car. Robbery is where you use force to steal something. So you're either, the threat of force, or you're pulling out a handgun or a weapon, or you're telling somebody you're going to hurt them, or you're actually assaulting them. So, but these guys were committing armed robberies in Fort Worth, and they were surveilling them and actually got them doing a robbery in progress and went to intervene with that robbery. While they were doing so, Officer Hull was shot in the head by one of the suspects. Other officers returned fire and killed that suspect. Officer Hull was immediately put in a patrol car and driven to the hospital. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries the next day and he died. There were 2 other suspects in that robbery, and they are both in custody. I imagine they will be charged with capital. Police Officer David Tinsley of the Fort Wayne Police Department in Indiana was assisting with a canine. It says assisting with a canine search. So I don't know if he's a canine officer, actually, or he was just out there. Canine was running a track, and he was out there helping find a suspect that had run after a vehicle pursuit. This was on September 10th. They located the suspect, got him into custody. While walking back to his vehicle, Officer Tinsley collapsed and started having a heart attack. Officers on scene began CPR. He was transported to a hospital, and shortly after midnight, he passed away. So he actually died on September 11th. Like I said, there's a lot of stress involved with this job, and heart attacks are pretty common. He was 50 years old, and he had been a police officer for 16 years. On September 7th, there were actually 2 line-of-duty deaths. The first one I'm going to tell you about is Deputy Aaron Roberts with the Greene County, Missouri Sheriff's Office. Looks like there was a 911 hang up. He responded there. He was clearing the call, and he put out an emergency radio transmission that he needed help. His car was actually swept away by the river, and they sent out a search team, and they found him about 50 feet down the road. His vehicle was submerged in water, and of course he had drowned. He had a wife and a 7-year-old daughter. He had only been a police officer for about a year, and he was 34 years old. The other one on September 7th is Deputy Kurt Ricks III. Not a lot of information here. It looks like his vehicle left the roadway. He overcorrected, went into the wrong lane, and him and another motorist both ended up being killed in the crash. He was 24 years old, and it doesn't give a service time, so he probably hadn't been a police officer very long. With all these, that was the last one. With all these, it doesn't matter if they were shot and killed, died of a heart attack, a car crash, drowned, whatever it was, they died in the line of duty, and they died because they were there doing their job. If they hadn't been doing this job, then they probably wouldn't have been where they were and died under those circumstances. And that can be said for pretty much all of these. So every one of these guys made a big sacrifice, and I just want people to remember that these guys are doing this all the time, and knowing it's a possibility every time they go out the door, and they continue to do it. So that's all I have on these, and I'm gonna come back on and talk to you about a couple things real quick. Alright, so I know I said I was gonna keep politics out of this one, but y'all know I just can't help myself. So the only thing I really want to say, I want to reach out to Nike and say, this is why I stand. Alright guys, thanks for watching.